Welcome to Malifaux University. 940 Guild Starter Box. If you're a player new to Malifaux, you may have received a great deal of information and advice about which faction is best for beginners, which master or keyword wins the most tournaments, and more. This information is largely opinionated and will change rapidly over time, so at Malifaux University, we still recommend you look at the basic lore of the game and factions available on the Wyrd website and follow the rule of cool. That is, whatever looks cool, feels cool, or makes you say, "Oh, cool," is the faction you should play, because you'll enjoy it the most, and that's ultimately the point of the game. Each faction has a starter box with 4 models. The soulstone cost of the individual models will vary, but the entire crew will add up to 25 soulstones, which is perfect for a small game. The starter box also contains a unique faction-themed fate deck, 10 scheme markers with the faction's logo, a measuring widget, and all the general upgrades available to your faction. Let's talk about each of these before we get to the models. This fate deck, while themed for the faction, is not the same as the regular faction fate deck you can purchase separately in the Wyrd store. This one is unique to the starter box, which is pretty cool. These are paper cards, which means they're not necessarily the most durable, and if they get wet, they will take damage. If you'd like to make them last, you can buy standard-size card sleeves from your friendly local game store in a variety of colors and styles. Just keep in mind that once you sleeve your cards, you won't shuffle them like a regular deck of cards. You'll blend the halves of the deck from the side 5 to 7 times. If you shuffle them normally, you'll put creases in the sides of the sleeves and kinda wreck them. A cardstock sheet has 10 scheme markers and the measuring widget. Punch them out carefully so you don't tear the design. These scheme markers do not need to go onto plastic bases. They're already 30 millimeters across and ready for the table. You can use these with any crew in this faction you later decide to build. If you play against someone else with a crew in the same faction, you'll need to distinguish your scheme markers from his somehow, maybe by putting a coin on top of yours. The measuring widget is a fantastic tool that can stand in place of a measuring tape in most situations. It has 1, 2, 3, and 6-inch sides. If you place the tool between 2 models, it makes it easy to tell if they're within 1 or 2 inches for engagement. If you need to measure an odd number like 5 inches, just lay down the 3-inch side of the widget, then rock it around the 2-inch corner like so. You'll also notice it has a 50 millimeter cutout. This is a surrogate blast marker. If you're unfamiliar, some game effects have this symbol, and when it appears, a model might suffer blast damage. You determine that by placing a 50 millimeter base over the area, usually in base contact with the original target model, and any models within the 50 millimeter blast area are affected. You can use this widget to measure that 50 millimeter diameter without having to place a 50 millimeter base on the table. Watch video 209 for detailed instructions on how to handle blast markers and damage. In the plastic sleeve with all the model stat cards are the general upgrades allowable by your faction. You can add these to your models before the game when you're hiring your crew with certain restrictions. Each upgrade adds abilities, actions, or both, so you might want to hold off on using them when you're first starting out. Once you get the hang of your models as they are, then switch things up with an upgrade or 2. Later, when you're building other crews led by master models, you can still use these upgrades with other models in the same faction. Check out video 406 for detailed instructions on how to use upgrades. The models in the starter box are all pre-assembled. This means they are all molded at the factory and are each a single piece, so no assembly or other tools are required. The only thing you'll need to do is glue them onto their included bases. Check the base size on the bottom of the back of each stat card to make sure you put each model on the right base. You could use regular white glue, also called PVA glue, but you'll find it doesn't hold very well for long. Most players will use plastic glue to fuse the models to the bases, but this works only if it's plastic to plastic. If you create thematic bases out of cardstock, cork, wallpaper, or anything else, you'll probably have to use superglue. Given that 3 of these 4 models are posed on a single foot, I pinned all 3 of them except Commander Bura. That is to say, I drilled a small hole through the base where I wanted the foot to make contact, drilled a hole into the model's foot, and put a steel pin through the two, gluing the model into place. This should provide enough stability for playing and transport. Once you have the models on their bases, you could put them on the table and get right to playing. When you can, though, you'll want to paint them according to your own unique style and preference. You might feel like you're not very good at painting models, but it's a skill that takes practice, and there are no better models to start on than your starter box models. There are countless YouTube channels, live streams, and other resources available to teach you how to paint, so we won't repeat that information here. Here's one way you could paint your models. The biggest challenge will be fine lines, as all of these models have little leather straps around their legs, arms, and other parts. A fine brush and a steady hand are all you need, and the patience to do touch-up painting when you realize you don't have either. Also, remember that Commander Bura and Bracer both have additional parts to glue on, so it's best not to base coat the pegs on Bura's hands or the slot on Bracer's arm. If you do, you'll eventually wind up gluing their shields onto the paint, which isn't the most solid point of contact. If you put a bit of putty over these spots before you base coat, that should keep them clean until you're ready to glue on the shields. The shields are translucent red plastic, and if you spray them with sealant like you should with all your painted models, they will become less translucent and more milky. I recommend you paint your models, seal them, and then glue on the shields for the best appearance. I'll take a brief moment now to thank all those who were patrons at the time this video was made, especially Griff, Suttergay, Tom, Alan, Jeremy, Mikolai, Oleg, and Travis, and many more at the free student tier. Your support is essential to bringing these videos to life. Now that we've explored everything else in the box, let's get to the models. The Vanguard Keyword models were introduced in the Ashes of Malifaux rulebook, so refer to that book for the lore and stories that go along with this crew. All 4 models have the Vanguard Keyword, so as long as range, line of sight, and other rules are satisfied, any ability or action that refers to a friendly Vanguard model can be applied to any of them. If their cards are updated through the errata, you can always get the most current cards through the Malifaux Crew Builder app or from the resources page on the Wyrd website. Commander Bura is the henchman who leads this crew. As a henchman, she is the only one of the Vanguard models eligible to use Soulstones. The Vanguard models all have one common ability called Shields Up. Normally, a model with the shielded condition can lower it by 1 to reduce suffered damage by 1, but only once at a time. Shields Up allows each Vanguard model to resolve the shielded condition any number of times in a single event. Since shielded can reduce damage to 0, this can result in these models surviving longer than may be expected. Going hand in hand with Shields Up is Under My Protection. This ability takes effect in the start phase of each turn and gives every Vanguard model shielded +1. This ability also kicks in when Commander Bura activates, giving her shielded +1 again, but also giving it to 2 other members of her crew within 4 inches. Note that this second part that happens when she activates can affect any member of her crew, even those without the Vanguard keyword, like you might hire later after expanding your model inventory. Also using the shielded condition is the Shielded Bullets ability. She can use this only once per activation, but that is once for each model's activation, not just hers. When a friendly model within 6 inches of Commander Bura declares a projectile attack action, Commander Bura can lower her own shielded condition by 1 to make that attack ignore both the shielded and incorporeal abilities, which would mean the target cannot reduce damage from that attack with either of those conditions. Just like the second part of Under My Protection, this ability can affect any member of Commander Bura's crew, not just Vanguard models. Commander Bura's last ability is Resupply. This also takes effect when she activates and allows her to draw 1 card from her discard pile that is not one of the 2 jokers and is value 5 or less. None of the Vanguard models have any game effects requiring a card to be discarded, but some other guild masters do, which makes this ability even more valuable when Commander Bura is integrated into other crews. For her, this can be handy when she tries to use her tactical actions, especially if she can get a 5 of rams. On the back of her card, Sword gives Commander Bura a 1-inch engagement range. It does 2, 3, or 4 damage, and if she gets a tome in the duel, she may declare the Field Kit trigger. This says that one member of her crew within 3 inches of her heals 1, 2, or 3 points of damage. This healing flip does not count as a duel, so you cannot use a Soul Stone to put a positive modifier on it, and it is flipped independently of the other duels. Also, since this is an aura effect, it may be used to heal Commander Bura herself, since auras affect their sources. A weak card of value 1 through 5 will heal 1, a moderate card of value 6 through 10 will heal 2, and a severe card with a value of 11 through 13 will heal 3. The Black Joker will heal nothing, while the Red Joker will heal severe plus 1, which in this case is 4. Unless you flip the Black Joker, which cannot be cheated, you always have the option of cheating in a better card from your hand if you don't like the card you flipped. Crushing Force is a ranged attack, but not a projectile attack, so cannot be enhanced with the Shielded Bullets ability. The good news is that you don't need that ability for this attack. It does 2 or 3 points of damage, and already ignores both shielded and incorporeal. Note that it is resisted by movement, so targeting models with lower movement stats or with the staggered condition will be more likely to succeed. The mask built into the stat guarantees the Get In There trigger, which lets a minion member of her crew who is in line of sight of the target model push up to 3 inches toward the target model. This minion doesn't need to be within 3 inches of the target model and doesn't have to push the whole 3 inches. Commander Bura has 2 tactical actions. Both of them have target numbers that are 5 above their stats, so if you were able to pull a 5 of rams out of your discard pile with resupply, that can be particularly handy with these. The first is called Remember the Mission. It has a target number of 12 and a stat of 7, so you need a 5 to make it work. You target a member of Commander Bura's crew that is within 4 inches of her, but you can't use this on the same model twice during this activation. Since it doesn't say other friendly model, you could definitely use this on Commander Bura herself. Remember the Mission lets the targeted model take the interact action, even if engaged. This could be to drop a scheme marker, remove scheme markers, or do something specific to a strategy or scheme. If the card in the duel is a ram, you can declare the This Will Numb the Pain trigger, which gives the targeted model shielded plus 1. Overload is Commander Bura's bonus action, which can be used only once per activation, regardless of whom she targets. With a target number of 10 and a stat 5, this also needs a 5 to succeed. This can target Commander Bura or any other member of her crew within 6 inches, but it's best to target a model with a high shielded condition and enemy models nearby. Overload generates a 2-inch pulse centered on the targeted model. Enemy models within that pulse must pass a target number 12 movement duel. Those that fail take as much damage as the targeted model's shielded condition to a maximum of 3. The cool part is that the targeted model doesn't have to lower its shielded condition to do this damage. Overload has one trigger, Marlowe's Finest, which comes from a ram and can be declared only if the Bracer model is within 6 inches of Commander Bura. If this is the case, the target number of the movement duel the enemy models must pass is raised from 12 to 14. Bracer is the enforcer of the Vanguard Keyword. She has shields up, like all other Vanguard models, letting her use shielded as many times as she wants. Her Herald ability will be used only once in the game, during the start phase of the first turn. This is after all models have been deployed, control hands are drawn, and everyone is ready to start. Bracer then may move up to 6 inches, so keep this in mind when you're putting her in place during deployment. During the start phase of every turn, including the first, Arcane Shield gives her shielded plus 1. Since these numbers all have the plus sign, they can be combined with other effects, like Commander Bura's Under My Protection ability. If they're both on the table, Bracer will start with shielded plus 2 each turn. Her other 2 abilities take effect at the start of her activation each turn. On the Move lets her move 3 inches when she activates, even moving through other models if she wants to. Since this is not a walk action, she is allowed to leave enemy engagement this way. Just remember that passing through other models does not let you finish with your bases overlapping. Arcane Resonance lets Bracer draw a card at the start of her activation if any master or henchman model in her crew is within 6 inches of her when she activates. If Commander Bura is within 6 inches of Bracer when Bracer activates, you can choose to end all the conditions on either one of them. You cannot split this between the two, so it's either Commander Bura or Bracer that benefits from this. It does say any number of conditions, so you do get to pick and choose which conditions you end on the chosen model. When you have 2 or more game effects that seem to take place at the same time, the player controlling the model gets to choose the order to resolve the game effects. In Bracer's case, On the Move and Arcane Resonance both say at the start of this model's activation. You get to pick which one you resolve first, but if Bracer isn't within 6 inches of one of the models listed for Arcane Resonance at the genuine start of her activation, using On the Move to get within 6 inches won't work. At the same time, if she starts within 6 inches of one of those models for Arcane Resonance, you can use On the Move first and then resolve the effects of Arcane Resonance based on where Bracer was before she moved, but it is kind of weird to do it that way. On the back of her card, Shield Slam gives Bracer a 1-inch engagement range. If successful, there is no damage flip. The target simply suffers 1 damage and is pushed up to 2 inches in any direction chosen by Bracer. Remember that armor cannot reduce damage to 0, but the shielded condition and incorporeal ability can. The RAM built into the stat guarantees the collision trigger, which takes effect after the target model is pushed, if at all. The trigger does 1 more damage to the target and all enemy models within 1 inch of where it ends up. This is a separate damage from the first one, so any reduction to damage would have to be applied to this one independently. If she gets a mask in the duel, she may declare Quick Shot, which lets her fire her Collier pistol attack for free, even if she's engaged. If she has an upgrade attached, which provides a different projectile attack, she could take that instead. Bracer's Collier pistol projectile attack has a 12-inch range. If she's within 6 inches of Commander Bura when she declares it, you can reduce Commander Bura's shielded condition with her Shielded Bullets ability to make this attack ignore both shielded and incorporeal. In any case, the attack does 2, 3, or 4 damage. A tome in the duel provides the Rations trigger, but only if she targeted an enemy model with the Collier pistol, which will be most of the time. After the attack is over and the damage is done, this trigger lets a member of Bracer's crew who is within 3 inches of Bracer gain shielded +1. It does not say other friendly model, so it could be Bracer herself who gains this condition. Bracer's first tactical action, Heroic Intervention, targets only an enemy model within 6 inches of her. It has a target number of 11 and a stat 5, so you'll need at least a 6 or better to make it work. There are no triggers, so the suit doesn't matter. When you make it happen, you push all friendly models, that is, members of your crew, who are within 1 inch of the targeted enemy model, 5 inches away from that target. It doesn't say up to 5 inches, so unless something gets in the way, you must push them the full 5 inches. Then, you push Bracer 6 inches toward the targeted enemy model. Again, unless something gets in the way to stop her, you must push her the entire 6 inches. Once there, Bracer can take a melee attack against that enemy model, which for her is her Shield Slam. Just like her Quick Shot trigger, if an attached upgrade gives her another melee attack, she can take that one instead of Shield Slam. Lastly, Shield Generator is her bonus action, which means she can take it only once during her activation. It has a target number of 12 and a stat 7, so she needs only a 5 to make it happen. Commander Bura's resupply ability might be a good way of making sure you have that 5 on hand. This bonus action just gives Bracer shielded +1, but the RAM built into the stat guarantees the Stay in Formation trigger. This says that another Vanguard model in Bracer's line of sight may push up to 3 inches toward Bracer. That other model does not need to start within 3 inches of her and does not have to push the full 3 inches, if any at all. The last models in the starter box are the Battering Rams. They are 2 distinct models, but they have identical stats, abilities, and actions. You'll see that they have a hiring limit of 2, so even if you buy another starter box with 2 more Battering Rams, you aren't allowed to have more than 2 in a crew at a time. They have shields up, like their comrades, and they have other fun ways of playing with a shielded condition and charging. Breaching Charge lets the Battering Ram ignore other models and even terrain while taking the charge action. It also gives the option to take the Slam action instead of a melee attack after the push part of the charge. This is cool, since you can charge your way through other terrain and models' engagement ranges, though you still cannot take the charge action if you're already engaged. Watch video 108 for more details on moving and charging. The Slam general action is used to remove destructible terrain within 1 inch, or to move an impassable marker within 1 inch and place it somewhere else within an inch. The Heavy Impact ability can also affect impassable terrain, which is most buildings on the playing area, but also some markers. This ability says when the Battering Ram ends a push in contact with either another model or impassable terrain, enemy models within 1 inch of the Battering Ram must pass a target number 11 defense duel or take 1 damage. You can use this in combination with the Breaching Charge ability to charge through terrain and models. Then, when you wind up where you're going, nearby enemy models must make the defense duel or suffer 1 damage, and then you can either take the Slam action or make a melee attack. A further detail on this ability is that it can be used only once per activation, but that can be once during each model's activation. If Bracer's Heroic Intervention or Shield Generator pushes the Battering Rams, they can use Heavy Impact to damage enemy models they wind up near. Similarly, Commander Bura's Crushing Force can push a Battering Ram, also meeting the conditions of Heavy Impact. Lastly, Building Momentum gives the Battering Ram Shielded +1 when it ends a movement caused by a friendly model. You can do this only once per activation, but it can even come from the Battering Ram's other abilities, or even just taking the walk or charge action, because every model is friendly to itself, and this ability does not say other friendly model. On the back, the Battering Rams have a sword melee attack that gives them a 1 inch engagement range. Like Commander Bura, it does 2, 3, or 4 points of damage, but has entirely different triggers. A ram lets you declare defensive reflexes, which gives the Battering Ram Shielded +1. A mask in the duel gives you Bowled Over, which pushes the targeted model 4 inches away from the attacking Battering Ram, and then pushes the Battering Ram 4 inches toward the target. Technically, one Battering Ram could attack another with his sword to get this trigger and push the other Battering Ram to qualify for the Building Momentum ability, but it's kind of a painful way to get Shielded +1. If you really need both Battering Rams to move 4 inches, this is one way you could do it. Only the one who is attacked would get shielded, though. Throw Knife is a projectile attack with an 8-inch range. Keep in mind Commander Bura's Shielded Bullets ability. If a Battering Ram is within 6 inches of her when he declares this attack, she can lower her shielded condition by 1 to make the knife ignore shielded and incorporeal. Otherwise, this attack does 1, 3, or 4 points of damage. If it does severe damage, the Battering Ram may place itself into base contact with the target. Since this is a place and not a push, you get to pick up the Battering Ram and set it down, which means you could put it on the other side of the targeted model if you wanted to. Throw Knife has 2 triggers. A crow gives you, "Ah, my eye!" This increases the damage by 1 and pushes the target up to 3 inches away from the Battering Ram. Triggers normally resolve after the primary effects of an action are complete, but this trigger says when resolving, so you'll increase the damage first and then push the model 3 inches away from the Battering Ram. If it's severe damage, you can then place the Battering Ram into contact with the target in its new location. The other trigger from a ram is Puncture. This doesn't increase the damage directly, but adds a positive modifier to the damage flip for every ram in the duel to a maximum of 2. As minions, battering rams cannot use soul stones, but they can have one ram from the card in the duel. If some other game effect from another model or something adds another ram, that would make it a double positive modifier, letting you flip 3 cards and choose whichever one you want. The battering rams have 2 tactical actions, and they are both bonus actions, so they can take only one during their activation despite having 2. The first is Shield Generator, which just gives the battering ram shielded +1. It has a target number of 12 and a stat 7, so you'll need a 5 to make it happen. This is another way you can spend that 5 Commander Bura can pull from her discard pile with her Resupply ability. Since this action has no triggers, the suit doesn't matter. The other bonus action is Take the Fight to them. It also has a target number of 12, but a stat of just 5, requiring a 7 or better to make it work. When you use this action, friendly models that declare the charge action may increase the distance of the push by 2 inches to a maximum of 7. This applies to all members of the battering ram's crew who are within 4 inches of the battering ram when they declare the charge, including the battering rams themselves, since this is an aura, and auras affect their sources. Now that you understand how your models work together, practice playing a simplified game. This format also works very well in your friendly local game store for demo games. Set the table with a normal amount of terrain, as described in the core rulebook and also in video 301. Each player claims one standard deployment zone, which is an even strip across one side of the playing area 8 inches from the table edge. It doesn't matter who goes first or sets their models on the table first, as long as no part of any model's base extends beyond the deployment zone. Watch all the videos in the 100 and 200 series so you have a grasp of the fundamentals before you play. Be sure to have corpse and scrap markers, as your models will likely drop one or the other of these when they are killed. Some models also use them for special effects. Lastly, you'll need pass tokens to either skip activating a model as the balance of the game shifts, or to pay for other special game effects depending on your crew. With that said, you'll play a full game of 5 turns, but with only 4 models in each crew, it won't take that long. You can play at just 25 soulstones, which will be all the models in your starter box, or you can play at 30 soulstones, which gives you a few extra for an upgrade or 2 and some soulstones left over for your soulstone pool. You might want to wait until your second or third game before adding in upgrades and soulstones, and for your first game, just focus on the abilities, actions, and basic game mechanics. You also may have learned that in games of a certain size, the crew leader gets to take 3 actions and a bonus action. That size is 50 soulstones, so at this 25 or 30 soulstone level, all models, even the crew leader, will take just 2 actions and a bonus action. Like regular games, there is no scoring victory points in turn 1. In turns 2 through 5, each player can score victory points in 2 ways: kill an enemy model, or place a scheme marker into base contact with a piece of terrain that is on the enemy half of the table. You'll have to remove the scheme marker to score the point, but in this simplified game, you can score as many victory points as you're eligible each turn. If you kill one enemy model anywhere on the table, and then remove 2 scheme markers that you had placed next to terrain on the enemy side of the table, then you'd score 3 victory points that turn. At the end of the 5th turn, count up all your victory points and see who won. Be sure to show good sportsmanship and shake hands with your opponent after your game. After a few beginning games like this, look into the Henchman Hardcore format in Gaining Grounds and take your game to the next level. That's the overview of the Guild Starter Box. Pick up a printable set of all the markers and tokens you need to play Malifaux in the Wargames Vault. If you haven't already, join our Patreon for early, ad-free access to all new content. And be sure to visit the Malifaux University gift shop for the latest in Malifaux-themed shirts, hoodies, drinkware, and more. Links are in the notes below. And remember, play friendly games, keep it simple, and have fun.